Hey kids, howdy and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams. It is the turn of the month. We're coming at you on October 28th, but we move into November this month. So it's the week of October 28th through November 3rd that we're going to be talking about today. And I think the best thing to say about the week is that on November 1st, we have a new moon. So we are done with this rather rock'em sock'em lunar cycle.
How'd that hunter's moon hit you?
You know, I got to tell you something. This is actually instructive. I'm glad you asked, because that was a wild fucking full moon. And because of the square and Pluto's participation in it, I was getting all sorts of feedback from my social media, responsive of just how difficult that week was. And while the week was hard for me personally, the actual full moon was beautiful because I have a cardinal grand cross in my chart. And this full moon's cardinal grand cross really matched mine pretty closely. And one corner of that in my chart is Jupiter. And so the full moon was 4 or 5 degrees away from my Jupiter. So the week was rock'em sock'em, knocked me on my ass, but the day itself was really lovely. Of course, I had the day off because I always do on a full moon, but because the moon was lighting up my Jupiter, the cardinal grand cross bumps were before and after, but not the day of.
Oh, good.
So yeah, but trust me, last week after the full moon kicked my butt.
Yeah.
One of the things that kicked my ass, though, was circumstantial, was just preparing for my first new class in years. I haven't created a new process class in several years. And Anxious Attachment started this past Saturday. And so whenever I start a class, we always keep the registration open, usually till like Tuesday of the next week, because people do work with the recordings and you can catch up. There's a fair amount of homework in this class, so if this does interest you, go to michaellennox.com, sign up for Anxious Attachment today or tomorrow before we close out registration, and so that you can catch up with class and maybe join us next week. It's an awesome class, and Saturday was so much fun. So check that out if that might be up your alley to explore healing some anxious attachment as we move into deeper into Scorpio season.
That's like perfect timing.
No, it's totally perfect timing. It's like, let's look at the shadow. Just as the sun is saying, that's what we're paying attention to, is death and rebirth and change and transformation, which is all what the new moon this week is going to be about. But first, let's do a question. This is from Lee, who writes, "Hi, Dr. Michael. On a recent podcast episode, you spoke about the power of returns and what to expect when a transiting planet or luminary is conjunct the same planet luminary in our natal chart. I was wondering if you could talk about what we can expect when transiting planets and luminaries cross a person's ascendant." That she points out some personal things about her chart. "Many thanks to you and Zoe for such a wonderful podcast. I'm so grateful for your guidance and wisdom. Best Lee, she, her." Love this question, and it's kind of got a kind of fun, juicy answer. Like the first top line answer would be, any planet or luminary conjuncting the ascendant is like an extra powerful conjunction because the ascendant is the most sensitive point in the natal chart. How we figure that out is the slower the orbit out there in the cosmos, the least weight the point in the chart has. Now, when we look at transits, it's the opposite. The slower the planet in transit land, meaning moving planets around the zodiac, around the cosmos, the slower the orbit, the more weight. But in terms of receiving energy, it's the opposite. The rising sign is the fastest moving point in the chart because it's directed by or generated by the spin of the Earth, right? The fastest, way faster than the moon, moving around the Earth. So just by virtue of the rising sign being the most energetically sensitive point in the chart, that alone amplifies any conjunction from a planet or luminary. Now, in terms of interpretation, it would be the same as a conjunction of any other planet in a chart, just interpreted through the lens of what the rising sign is. The rising sign is how we meet the world. It's our persona and how people see us, but it's also how we move out into the world and show up for others to engage with. You could even think of it as your face and the front of your sort of visage as you meet the world. It's literally where the body comes into birth. Sixth house is health of the body, but the first house in Aries is the body itself. So the rising sign is also your physical experience of being in the world, relating to the world outside of you. So it's going to be relational when a planet or a luminary hits the rising sign. If it's Jupiter, the planet of expansion and abundance, you're going to be fucking attractive as all get out when Jupiter crosses your ascendant. Maybe same as Venus, right? Where a lovely, yummy planet's energy meets the horizon and impacts how we are visible in the world. So you could do that with any other transiting planet, right? Pluto crossing the ascendant is like a year's worth of death and rebirth of who you are in the world. It's the hardest transit there is to even survive. Where the moon every month that's fast is just like a mood where you might be more lit up with connecting to the outside world because the light of unconscious is shining on your ascendant. But the real juicy thing to think about with a conjunction of any planet or luminary to the ascendant is the fact that right before that happens, said planet or luminary has been hanging out in your 12th house of the unconscious. So think about that. The moon drops into your 12th house, and for like 2.5 days, maybe, your unconscious is being deeply stimulated by the energy of the moon, such that when the moon hits your rising sign and enters your first house, there's going to be things you know about your unconscious that 3 days prior you didn't know. Right? Because the moon crosses the territory, triggers unconscious material, and then shoves it into the first house when the moon crosses that line. Well, the same thing would be true of the sun and conscious awareness. It might spend a month traveling through your 12th house where you feel confused and not really clear and grounded, but maybe dreams are on point. And then the sun enters your first house and it's like, woohoo, I'm consciously aware of who I'm being more than ever. And you could do the same sort of thing that I'm doing right now with now the moon and the sun with all of the planets. And again, the slower the planet, the longer the traversing of the 12th house, the more digging into the unconscious that planet is doing. And when that planet hits the rising sign, the consciousness of the transiting planet bursts into our conscious awareness, sense of self in the world, meeting the world as a person relating to others. So it's a juicy thing when a planet hits the rising sign, triggering who you are in the world, but it's made even juicier because of what that planet or luminary has been triggering in deep, untouchable places in your psyche, such that when it hits your first house, woohoo, we're learning a thing or two about who we are below the surface. There's not a whole lot to talk about this week, but we are in a few minutes going to be talking about our next new moon. So before we get to Mars and everything that he's up to and that new moon in Scorpio that's happening later in the week, I'll point out that we have what's called a black moon this month in the true fashion of what a blue moon is and what a black moon is. Now, I'm going to explain it all, and I'm going to tell you that I don't give a shit about any of this. It just doesn't feel significant to me at all. But what a black moon is, by definition, is 2 new moons in the same calendar month.
Right.
Whereas a blue moon is 2 full moons in the same calendar month. So, I guess astrologers a few hundred years ago, when the Julian calendar came into existence, about 400 years ago, made this correlation between the cycle of lunations and this newly established, very false timing of a calendar. I mean, calendars are human constructions. They don't really have anything to do with time as we experience time, but we have to divide up our moment-to-moment experience in this way that we can share as a collective. We call it time, and it's definitely a thing. So indeed, because this month's first new moon is in Scorpio on November 1st, that means we have a whole month of November in which to have another new moon, which we then do on the very end of the month. The 30th is our new moon in Sagittarius. Now, there's something lovely and elegant about the synchronicity of that. I'll give you that. It's synchronistic. It's powerful coincidence that we can make some meaning of. That we perceive time in a function of calendar months because that's what we've agreed upon for 400 years. So that's a collective structure that is. And yeah, on the first day of the month and the last day of the month, in the month where we're in death and rebirth, change and transformation, that means we have a whole lunar cycle of death and rebirth that kicks off in the month of death and rebirth and finishes at the end of the month. Months are not astrological, but November is. Because of this black moon phenomenon, first day, last day, we have a new moon. The reason I don't give a shit about this is that I'm not that jazzed about correlating the movement of planets with the calendar. That always has felt like something we were forced to do and are forced to do. And we do it intuitively. We don't think too much about it. But I don't find it to be a powerful idea, especially like in the area of full moons, like 2 full moons in a calendar month. You know, it's kind of like saying, ooh, there's 3 Fridays, so 4 or 5 Fridays, we're going to get an extra paycheck. I don't know if you've ever worked corporate, but when you get paid bi-monthly, there's always 2 months a year where you get like an extra dollar amount in the calendar month. But that's also like, it's forced. It's a manipulation of time. So that's why it doesn't interest me. What does interest me in the full moon, blue moon arena is when there are 2 full moons in the same sign in a row. And then I don't care what the calendar month is. That's a phenomena worth talking about because then that says there are 2 opportunities to release from within in the same archetype twice in a row. That's an opportunity for us to stay focused in one area of our consciousness, have a release, and then do it again. That's powerful, but we don't talk about that. We don't have a name for that. So I don't care about the calendar month period, and new moons never do what I just described about, full moons, because new moons are always going to be in a new sign. But it is a black moon month, and I want y'all to know my perspective of this as you move through the month and see all of the memes that will maybe tell you that it's outrageously powerful, and it's just not. Have at that. Now, there's a lot to talk about with Mars this week. First of all, he's in his retrograde shadow all month. So understand that the entire month of November, you want to be paying attention to your projects, your body, your goals, your aspirations, not only that which you put into them, but then what occurs in the world around your body, goals, work, sex, anger. In some ways, this might be one of the bigger weeks to pay attention to all of those Mars things because several things are happening during the week with Mars. For one thing, there are 2 triple transits that are part of his ongoing cycle that hit this week. A trine to Neptune and an opposition to Pluto. Part of what's making the Mars retrograde so deeply intense is that he's making contact with all of the outer planets, and all of them are changing signs next year. That's going to be an epic, epic shift for the entire planet. You definitely don't want to miss my forecast for 2025 that I do near New Year's, because it's going to be epic. And Mars is our body, and we're being prepared. Mars in Cancer is really deeply restorative. It shifts us at the internal level powerfully, and I think sets us up to be ready for next year's changes. That's really the message for me, that it's like all of us are going to be required next year to contain and hold a lot more worldly drama.
God.
Yeah, I know. I hate to say it.
I feel like I'm really at capacity.
I know.
Here.
Listen, if we get through these next couple of years, I'm going to be able to start talking about things that are more restorative and new rather than destructive. But that's what the story is.
God
So
willing.
so all the outer planets are changing sides next year. Tune in with me later to find out what that means. But Mars' retrograde is touching each of them, and that makes it a powerful and important preparation for us as individuals, Mars in Cancer, meeting the world at large, which is going to need all of us at our best next year. The interaction between Mars and Uranus is less relevant in terms of the way I talk about astrology, because it's a sextile. Sextiles are productive energies. Your Mars and Uranus in a sextile just inspires us to take risks, to be free, to have a sense of I can do anything if I put my mind to it. I'm not afraid of change. All of these things are like the language of Mars in a sextile, productive geometry with the Great Awakener. So we don't care about that. I don't mean I don't care about it happening. I mean, you don't need any help from me to be alive and vibrant and ready to take risks. You might need help understanding where we're blocked and what is supportive. And the Neptune-Pluto piece is about block and support, or work and support. So the trine from Mars to Neptune, to me, is the support. Neptune allows us to connect to flow and intuition and guidance and things that are greater than us in a consciousness of what I call the divine or God. The God of quantum physics and atheism, not the God of religion. But Neptune is that ability to say, I feel carried through life. And Mars in a trine with Neptune allows for that pretty deeply. So you do want to be sort of paying attention right around now. Like, this is the date, the 28th. Monday the 28th is the day that Mars' trine with Neptune is exact. So that means you want to think about the weekend behind us today and tomorrow, these couple of days. What's your spiritual fitness feeling like? How much are you connected to either feeling like you're being supported by the divine, or the counterpart to that, do you feel confused and unclear? Right? Trines don't just mean good. Trines mean flow. And when the body is flowing with Neptune, it is possible for us to have both the top and the bottom of the wheel of Neptune's consciousness. At the top, it's pure, intuitive carrying and flow and guidance. And we're connected. We feel that. But Neptune also has an artifact of shadow and unclear, landscapes ahead. We don't usually say that Neptune is triggered if the geometry is positive, but how do I finish the sentence? I guess I'll just say, but Neptune is Neptune, right? So we got to respect the possibility. But that's what you want to be looking at today and the few days behind us and the few days ahead of us. How are you connecting with your spiritual support? And if it doesn't feel like it's enough, you got to amp that up with behavior. And know that the energy that we're talking about at the beginning of this week is also coming back in like the second week of January and the middle of April. It's a long cycle with Mars, but now's the time to check in with your meditative practice and how easily you're going to support from the invisible, where Mars operates in the world of the visible form so acutely. On Sunday, now this one is the juicy juice. This is the opposition from Mars to Pluto. It's also daylight savings time change in the United States, so that's going to fuck us up, and so is Mars opposing Pluto. Really and truly, the nugget of change and transformation, the deaths that are required in order to have a rebirth, are built into this piece, where the body is facing off with the Lord of the underworld, and oppositions force things to occur. 2 points cannot oppose without dancing or swerving or crashing or something, right? So that is an energy that's hitting like next weekend. It's exact on Sunday, but be paying attention over the weekend and Sunday and Monday. We'll certainly be talking about this again at next week's podcast, because right after Sunday's opposition from Mars at the 30th degree of Cancer to Pluto at the 30th degree of Capricorn, Mars is going to move into Leo. Right? So it's kind of like this. It's like on Sunday, the body lays down to receive the sort of death knell of change. Like, say, on Sunday, when you wake up, say this prayer: I am willing to allow anything to change that has to change in order for me to get my embodied life on a better path. Because that's the energy of Mars opposing Pluto. Now, there's a couple of juicy things to also add to this. For one thing, Mars is still a ways away from his retrograde, but he's already showing a magnificent slow down momentum. Typically, Mars moves about a degree and a third a day. And he'll be at the 30th degree, 29 degrees of Cancer, for like 3 days. So that's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Mars is moving so slow, he's at the final mastery degree of Cancer. So that counts in this opposition too, because not only is the anaretic degree important, right? It amplifies everything. So we already know Pluto at the amplified anaretic degree of Capricorn says he means business about destroying old structures. Now, we talk about that mostly about the outside world, but honey, the structures are structures. And if there are structures tumbling out there, there's structures tumbling inside our psyches. And so Mars slowing down at this mastery degree of Cancer. What does Cancer say? Well, Cancer says, I will rest. I will prepare. I will, we talk about Cancer as the place where we maybe hide back, but the purpose of that hiding back isn't to stay on the couch eating bonbons. It's to prepare to act and move and do. But we're talking about a death and an ending and a change. So what you want to be paying attention to as we move towards the weekend is, comfortable are you right now with the things that are changing? For some of you, it's going to be everything. For others, it's going to be your nail polish color, right? You know what I mean? Like it's going to hit everybody differently. But it's going to hit everybody this coming weekend with a sense of what's changing. So now we pay attention to where we're feeling supported by the divine. And next weekend, we take a look and be sort of in embracing and readiness for everything that's changing. Understanding that the energy of Mars opposing Pluto might be, show up as power struggles and difficulty next Sunday. The value of paying attention to what's changing and then put that awareness into your sense of the 6 months of Mars's entire cycle. The opposition to Pluto will also come back a couple of times, but here's what's juicy about that. The next time Mars, now retrograde and not in Cancer, but in Leo, is going to oppose Pluto in Aquarius. So on January 2nd, when this opposition happens for the second time, Mars will be retrograde, which means whatever he experiences will be more internal for us. But in Leo, no longer in the prep mode of Cancer, now in the personally self-expressive sign of Leo. Anyway, I'm not going to go too deeply into this because it's months away, and we'll talk about it in earnest in January of 2025. But then there's a third wrap up in April. And I just want to then pull us back to this weekend. This is an opportunity this weekend to really dive internally and allow for the greater changes that you're courageous enough to, intend at this time. And just know that whatever shows up energetically this weekend, when those transits return in January and April, we're going to be operating in a much different way with Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. So the Scorpio mansion is where we go to die. I love connecting the evolution of the signs with the movement through our seasons because astrology originated in the Northern Hemisphere. So apologies to all y'all down under. You just have to do the flip of this. But for the way the zodiac evolved, you can't separate the order of the signs and the way seasons play out because there's a direct connection between seasonality and why we have astrology in the first place. So as the days are getting shorter and we're moving towards like the dead death of winter, Scorpio is that energy that says we're preparing for that. It's autumn. I grew up in the East, Northeast in New York and upstate New York and New Jersey. And, the November's when the leaves are stunning and gorgeous. This is interesting to me. Sagittarius is the sign of truth. And in the Sagittarius mansion, the leaves are gone. The truth is we're in death. The truth is it's winter.
Okay.
In Scorpio, we're in this change and transformation. Ooh, look at the leaves. I know I'm talking about a singular experience of only people who live where the leaves change, but go with me, kids. It's like the leaves change and it's seductive and beautiful and very reminiscent of spring. What happens in spring? Color. What happens in autumn? Color. One is the color palette of new birth and the reemergence in spring, and this is the color palette of death, only we don't know that till the truth of Sagittarius. So it's like Scorpio energy coaxes us towards being willing to lie down, die a little bit to be reborn with some change and transformation. Given the fact that we're coming out of eclipse season, last lunar cycle was epic in taking us through our relationship experience because that was kicked off by a new moon in Libra, the sign that invented relationships. We are now setting intentions for the changes and transformations we're ready to move through so that we can spring out next spring and explode and take over the world. So what I said earlier about the Mars retrograde cycle, especially his presence in Cancer, is like preparatory to be able to move into next year with like all our cylinders firing so we can help and support the world's potential for peace that's as present next year as the potential for violence. And this new moon sort of tells us to be ready for that kind of change. Are you? Will you? Are you willing to? And a trine between the new moon and Saturn, one that makes it an easier moment in a way, because Saturn is always kicking our asses to do the right thing. And because it's a trine, the implication there is that we're ready or we'll be ready, that we're being carried into the surrender of change. It's right before election day in the United States, right? So right there is the invitation. It's like we're about to go into something in the United States, certainly, that is terrifyingly about the death of the old. No matter where the U.S. goes in the next 5 years, whether it goes into a more progressive place where all are cared for, or it goes into a fascist place, that is another version of how a country can run, both say that the old way is dying. America as it was is dead. November, whatever, is election day is in a way the circumstantial beginning of the actual sense of we're dying to recreate something new. And remember, if it's happening out there, it's happening inside each of us. So the collective, again, forgive me, my foreign listeners, for so perseverating on the United States. I am an American, so it's just right there in my face. And you can think of this as symbolic for meaning everything, which is that if there's a death and a rebirth needing to be happening out there, that means there's one in each of us, right? And this is that new moon where you say, yes, I'm ready to let change happen. I'm ready to embrace a life of change and transformation. I'm ready to embrace a life where I'm more comfortable with personal power and the shadow that lives in the underworld. Scorpio is where we're the most comfortable with the darkest aspects of our humanity. And man, oh man, do we need that? And we all need our Scorpio rage and shadow. We all need this to be known by us, seen and organized and placed where it belongs. This is why my whole teaching outside of astrology is devoted to shadow work and healing, because that's what I did to get to the freedom that I live in now. And when more people are cleaner and clearer of their inner, I'll just use the word rage as a shorthand, their inner rage, whatever shadow that's describing. The more of us that are free of that on the planet, the more the reflection outside will be less enmity, war, and destruction, and more love. But we got to go through the fires first. And this lunar cycle, Scorpio moon at 9 degrees, trining 12 degrees Saturn, retrograde, says, I'm willing to take responsibility for all the changes that I'm here to spearhead. That Mars-Pluto opposition that I just got done describing in detail, that's exact in the new moon, right? And then Mars is going to move into Leo right after, right? So that's an interesting thing about this lunar cycle. It says that as we set intentions, we're in this very internal willingness to lie down and receive the new, adjustments in your psyche to move forward. Anytime Pluto or Scorpio is involved, I usually call a lunation something to do with like a psychic surgery. It's not a release of a full moon. It's more like the surgery to implant the consciousness of, I'm willing to allow any internal change that's necessary in order for me to step into my power, so that when Mars moves into Leo, which is all about outward expressions of personal power, Mars has this transformative energy of the new moon with him for the rest of his cycle. Since we're talking about oppositions and the fact that two planets that oppose each other must express something dynamic, it is stunning that Venus, truthful seeking in Sagittarius, is opposing Jupiter in Gemini. That's a dynamic sense of love and possibility and manifestation power as long as we come from truth, right? Scorpio energy can hide truth, and Venus in Sagittarius can do nothing but tell the truth. So that's going to be interesting in the world of intimacy and relationships in the lunar cycle ahead. So warning or alert, not warning, I'm sorry, I'm going to take warning back, just alert to all y'all in a relationship dynamic these months, especially if it's a healing narrative. The truths of what you feel in your heart are going to be really important to get and know and express, both to yourself when you're looking in the mirror and to others if there's something you need to communicate to people that you're having intimate experiences with. Because Venus in Sagittarius will only come from truth. Opposing Jupiter, she says, if I come from truth, the whole world is my oyster. But the backdrop of the new moon cycle says death, rebirth must happen in order for that truth in your heart and the abundance you desire to come into fruition. But because they're both present, you can't dismiss one for the other. Right? So it might not be a new moon where we're like exploding into our abundance, but make no mistake, there's explosive abundance built into this new moon because of Venus and Jupiter holding that opposition. Mercury's in Scorpio in an exact almost trine with Mars. I love that in the new moon because we set intentions with our mind. Mercury is that mind and our words and our intention mechanism. And in Scorpio, Mercury's comfortable with the shadow and the depth and power struggles and death and rebirth and a willingness to go through the, transformative energy so that we can rise up. And the fact that in the water sign of Scorpio, he's trining Mars in Cancer means that our mind is right there in alignment with the shadow and power to be clear about the intentions we need to set in order for that Mars-Pluto opposition to do its deep work on us. And then if you sort of circle around more, you can see that, oh, look, Mercury is also opposing Uranus and trining Neptune. So that, again, puts our mind in very direct connection with the lunation by opposing Uranus and saying anything can happen and probably will, and trining Neptune that says, and I won't get knocked off my ass when the anything that can happen and probably will comes up because I'm connected to spirit through Neptune. So, powerful, powerful, transformational new moon in Scorpio. Set intentions to allow all the changes you need to go through in order to rise up next year and have next year be amazing, even though we're going to be grappling with epic changes. So we finished with the good news and the hope and the yummy, because one of the things that's also hitting this week, and it's sort of built into the new moon, I sort of saved it for this. Jupiter is sextiling Chiron. This first came into formation back in the beginning of October, and now it's hitting again on November 2nd. And because of this retrograde motion that they're both engaged in, this sextile can be considered activated for the entire month of October and certainly most of the month of November. Covers right through election season in the United States. Thank God there's some element of hope. Chiron and Jupiter working well together eradicates Chiron's connection to our deep wounded spaces and elevates him to the role of that energy that knows how to use the force. That's why I often call this aspect of Chiron like Yoda. It ages me a little to, Yoda teaching Luke how to use the force. I saw that movie as a teenager, so I was like, I want to be Luke. Actually, I want to be
Star
Yoda.
Wars still.
Right. So Chiron as the mystery helper and Jupiter as the expander working really well together. That's manifestation energy. Jupiter invented manifestation and Chiron came along to teach us how to do it. So with them working well together, our minds are ready to create powerful new elements of hope and magic. Chiron in Aries, cardinal fire, starts up new ways of working with the mystery and being powerful as magicians. Jupiter's not so happy in the sign of Gemini. He's a little debilitated here, but there's still value in the planet of manifestation in the sign of words, while Chiron is in the sign of fiery movement. Anyway, the point is, there is hope. It's being expressed by Jupiter and Chiron. It's built right into this new moon, which is why it carries a little further. Even though it's waning by mid-month, it's part of the new moon landscape. So it gets carried through not only the entire 28 and a quarter days of the lunar cycle, it means that as we courageously set intentions to go into the deepest, most scary parts of our shadowy realms, we're being carried through this because as we do that, we will create more magnificent lives. Pluto and Chiron are guaranteeing that for us. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
Okay, so this is from Louise. And she says, firstly, I love your podcast and your teachings. I've learned
Yay.
so much from you and start my Mondays with you too.
Love that.
I've had a reoccurring dream for 10 years and it's driving me nuts. It always involves a home that we left in Oxford. I loved that flat and the city, but we moved away from the flat and the city after having our daughter, as it just was not practical anymore. They moved to the suburbs nearby. And in parentheses, she put, ugh.
That's so funny because, I'm already engaged, right? In the listening. My teacher's already engaged in me. And it's like that was sort of what I was feeling. I mean, I was right there with her.
The suburbs. Ugh.
Well, there's also something about, the change. I mean, I'm interrupting to the dream to sort of say that. I mean, clearly that when anyone has a child, that's a death rebirth of the old life, right? So deep change, transformation happens when so we are talking about a major change when they move. So the UGG is fabulous.
Yeah. The dream always has the same format, but has tweaked itself over the years. I'm back in the flat and am bursting with joy. I'm so excited to be back home. Usually it has changed somewhat, often for the better. Then I remember I don't live there anymore. Initially, the dream was that we had snuck back into the house and stayed without permission, and we were trying to leave before the new tenants got back and found us. Then it changed to we were staying in there, but had to choose between the house we own now in the suburbs and the flat we were renting. Oxford is horrendously expensive. Now, like the current rendition
third
of the
iteration,
dream.
right,
Third
number
iteration. Now it's that we are renting it, and I realize I have to pay rent and the mortgage on this house, but I'm going to go with it because I'm so happy to be there. It's never the best place for my kid in terms of schools, so I never want to leave my own house entirely because I do love it. It's just not local. I know it's a message. I have ideas, but I could really do with your guidance. Thanks so much, and big love from the UK.
Yay. Thank you, Louise.
Okay, my thought about this is that there's three iterations of the dream.
Yep.
And it's just reflections on a place you loved and a place you currently live that
Can you see a progression?
Okay.
From 1, 2 to 3?
Well, the progression is I'm not supposed to be here, then maybe I belong here, then I absolutely belong in both of these places, and I'm going to do it. I don't have the and.
Perfect. The end is I'm willing to pay the price for both.
Okay, so here's my question, which is what I'm wondering if Louise is like me, in which it's like, okay, there's a progression in the dreams, obviously. But then where I lose it is like, what's the conclusion? And also it seems like these are all thoughts in the dream that I'm assuming are thoughts in real life, but these are not things she's doing in real life. So like, what does that represent?
By putting
she's
them
actually
together,
doing it in the dream.
Right. So the point about number 3 and the fact that she's there and happy to be there and paying a rent and a mortgage suggests that part of her happiness is the willingness to have both and pay for both. Right? So let me start at the top and take you there, and it'll be, I think, real clear when we're done. So we did half the work already when we just chatted about the idea of having a child is a death to the old life. Whether you like the suburbs or not, just that threshold for a couple is life-changing. Mm-hmm. The fact that she loves the flat, then we're going to say, okay, that's some sort of consciousness of freedom that isn't about being a mom. Like, we know now that the flat is antithetical to my responsibilities as a mother. And it's not even about suburbs or, dull and city is vibrant. It's from the dream story, it's Oxford Flat now represents the old sense of Louise having freedom. And the house is the responsibility of life as life is. And because the theme structure is always that she's there, she's happy to be there, and this is important, she sees changes for the better. This is an important piece of the dream for me because that tells me, the listener, that her relationship to this rental flat has consciousness and it's growing. It's now not a nostalgic memory of what I used to love about my old life and freedom. It's not that. It's something that lives inside Louise still. She meets it most directly in dreams, but if she's meeting in the dream world, it's because she's meeting it in her life. So every dream of being back there is probably coming in moments of joy, right? Where life feels blissful. So the fact that it evolves to me says that it's a consciousness that's definitely part of Louise, not a regretful memory, but something that's actually growing. Hence, the 1, 2, 3 ways that she relates to it in this dream also reflects growth, right? You following me? Mm-hmm. So both things reflect that there's growth in Louise's relationship to an internal sense of freedom and joy and the ability to burst with that joy in life, because she used that phrase literally. I'm bursting with joy to be back home. So indeed, the 1, 2, 3, the first piece is, okay, let me say before I say that, we accept that the mortgage, the house, is Louise as self now, right? I am Louise, I have a house, I have a child, I am that. So that the flat is the inner joy. The first piece says, oh, I don't own my joy. In order to get joy, I have to sneak it in. No, now I'm like, I don't know anything about Louise and her lifestyle, but like how many parents, I mean, please, I had a puppy 4 months ago, and I certainly understood that I had to sneak in certain freedoms that I had lost, right? So that's the principle I'm talking about, that the first iteration is reflecting how she related to joy in a manner that didn't really own it or feel deserving of it, but wanting it enough to sneak it in. Mm-hmm. What did she say about trying to evolve before getting caught? That's what my note says. Would you?
They snuck back in and they're trying to leave before the new tenants found them.
Ah, got it. So, right, it's just a reinforcement for the lack of ownership.
Right, like they're not supposed to be there.
That I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be joyful. I'm not supposed to have bursts. I'm not supposed to be free. So then it evolves. It's like we're staying there again, right? We're in the joyful place. Remember that. The dream has her in the joyful place always. So it's a dream about owning the joyful place. Mm-hmm. First one, she doesn't deserve it at all. Second one, now deserving arises, but it feels like an impossibility because it's a binary. It's an either or. I think that's an evolution from sneaking in and feeling like it can't be mine at all. At least in the second iteration, she owns both, but she doesn't get to have both. Mm-hmm. So what I love then about number 3, the dynamic transcendent third that happens when we have the energy of 3, is she gets both, but it comes at a cost. And the cost isn't like, to me, the cost is just what the currency we pay ourselves to both meet our responsibilities and cultivate our joy. Right? So sometimes to cultivate our joy, we have to address our responsibilities in a way that might buy us some time. Sometimes we have to cut off our joy because our responsibilities require that we put something joyful off to meet our deeper needs of structure. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by paying rent and mortgage. I don't think of it as what it would be in life, where it would be like, holy fuck, I'm paying $7,000 a month because I've got a mortgage and a rent. But it's dreamland where paying the rent and paying the mortgage is a beautiful exchange of I, Louise, will cultivate my responsibilities, I will cultivate my joys, and I will create a life that has equal access to both.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.